My name is Eleanor Hartley. I am 67 years old, a widow, living quietly in Savannah, Georgia. For most of my life, I was a wife, a mother, and a public high school principal. I thought the hardest part of my story ended when I buried my husband, Benjamin. I was wrong. The real test began the week after my son's wedding. That morning, I opened the front door and saw Rachel, my new daughter-in-law, standing with a man I had never met. He carried a leather briefcase. Her smile did not reach her eyes. Before I could ask what this was, he stepped into my kitchen and set a thick folder on the table. Across the top of the first page, in bold, were the words, "Power of Attorney." Rachel leaned in as if this were nothing more than a neighborly visit. Her voice was sweet, practiced. She said, "We just want you to be safe, Mom. We want to protect you." I sat down slowly. I did not touch the folder. Instead, I watched the steam curling up from my coffee in a porcelain cup painted with magnolias. My silence must have unsettled them, but they did not know silence has always been my strongest weapon. Inside my head, one truth roared louder than any words I could speak. $35 million. That is what Benjamin left me when he died. Money earned over decades of sacrifice, of living below our means, of saying no when others said yes. A fortune I had never mentioned, not even to our son. Before his last breath, Benjamin squeezed my hand and whispered, "Do not tell them. Not yet. One day you will understand why." Now, staring at Rachel's polished nails tapping the folder, I understood exactly why. This was the day he prepared me for. I wanted to laugh, but I let the moment hang heavy, like a curtain between us. My son's wife thought she was guiding me gently into a cage, locking the door with legal language I could never undo. But she underestimated the quiet strength of a woman dismissed too many times, a woman who learned that sometimes you win not by shouting, but by waiting. As the lawyer cleared his throat, something shifted inside me. The wedding only days earlier came rushing back. The band was playing, glasses clinked. My son, Matthew, danced with his bride beneath chandeliers and arches of magnolia. Where was I? At table 13, tucked behind a veil of leaves, my view of the dance floor blocked as if my presence did not matter. I had smiled politely, but in truth I was hidden in plain sight. That was the night I stayed silent about my inheritance, and thank God I did, because if I had spoken, if I had shared that truth, then by the time I opened this door, I would already have nothing left. This is where my story begins. The day I realized silence had saved me. The day my daughter-in-law arrived with a lawyer at my door, expecting me to surrender everything. My name is Eleanor Hartley, Nor. I am 67, a widow, and I live in Savannah, Georgia. For most of my life, I ran a public high school on Whitaker Street. It paid the bills and let me be home by dinner. Before that and during it, I spent 40 years as Benjamin's wife. Benjamin was a quiet man with careful hands. He measured twice, cut once, and kept leftover screws in coffee tins. He believed in patching before replacing. People called it thrift. I called it faith that a life can survive any weather. The house we bought in our 20s still creaks in winter. Pipes sigh. Windows chatter when the river wind moves through oaks draped with Spanish moss. Out back stands the magnolia corner Benjamin planted after his father died. He said grief needs something to tend. The magnolias lean on a simple fence. He mended it each spring in his navy blazer, sleeves rolled, pencil behind his ear. That jacket hangs in my closet like a quiet flag. When I touch the fabric, I feel his patience again. The slow rhythm of a man who knew how to keep storms outside and peace inside at night. I keep the house by routines Benjamin would recognize. Sweep the porch on Tuesdays. Wash the coffee pot on Fridays. Trim the spent magnolia blooms when the light is kind. My hands remember the ledger, columns, totals, reconciling pennies until they match. At school, I learned that order calms fear. When numbers match, the world feels safe. Benjamin taught the same lesson with wood and wire. Fix the hinge, oil the lock, wait before buying new. We did not chase trips or granite counters. We stacked small choices like bricks. People called it plain. We called it freedom that survives the bills. 40 years with Benjamin felt like a long, sturdy bench beneath an oak. He did not raise his voice. He raised beams, raised tomatoes, and raised our son with the same steady grip. When money was tight, he brought home salvage boards and built shelves. When my mother fell ill, he learned to cook simple soups. He kept receipts in envelopes and screws in jars. He believed waste was a kind of disrespect. If he had a religion, it was care, not grand gestures. Small repairs done right, done now. People trusted him because nothing he promised came cheap, ever. After Benjamin died, the house went quiet in a new way. Even the clock seemed to tick with a gentler kind of courage. I slept on his side for a while, then drifted back to mine. The magnolias kept blooming because plants do not bargain with grief. I learned the weight of afternoons. Matthew visited less once the engagement was set. His life widened while mine narrowed. He was polite and distracted. Calls on speaker while driving. Messages late and brief. When I asked how he was, he said fine. When he asked how I was, I said fine, too. Still, I rose each morning and dressed as if someone might stop by. Cardigan buttoned, hair brushed, the porcelain coffee pot polished until it shone. The high school retired me with a sheet cake and a gift card. I thanked them and went home to my ledger habits. I still balance numbers on scrap paper, groceries against pension, utilities against the comfort of turning on the porch light early. The radio filled the kitchen with weather and baseball. Mrs. Caroline next door waved from her mailbox. We spoke about magnolias and the price of eggs. When the sun dipped, I locked the door and listened. On clear days, I sat on the back steps and looked at the fence. The fence Benjamin kept mending. I could see him there, navy blazer, sleeves rolled, pencil behind his ear, measuring the sag and saying it was nothing patience could not fix. Matthew used to pass him nails from a coffee tin, hands eager, eyes copying his father. I remember the day Matthew was tall enough to hold the level. Benjamin smiled like sunrise. Those images stay plain as photographs. I keep them close because they tell the truth about us. We built slow, careful, and called it enough. As the months turned, invitations arrived with dates and dress codes. Matthew and Rachel charted a life of venues and menus. I ironed my navy dress and circled the day on the calendar. I told myself, distance is normal. Children drift, then return when the tide changes. I set the table for one and learned to bless the silence between meals. When a board creaked at night, I pictured Benjamin walking the hall, and I slept easier. I did not know how quickly politeness could become strategy, how quickly love could be measured in signatures. I only knew to be ready. St. Helena's Episcopal smelled like lilies and floor polish, the kind of shine that turns every step into a whisper. I arrived early, and a young usher guided me through the reception hall. He stopped by a round table near a marble column, checked his clipboard, and announced, "Table 13. The centerpiece rose like a trimmed tree, glass and pale magnolia stacked high enough to hide a person. I sat and realized the column and the flowers made a perfect wall. My world became petals and the thin sound of other people's joy. If I leaned left, I caught a sliver of the aisle. If I leaned right, I saw the corner of the head table and one edge of the cake. Between those angles, only leaves and light. I straightened my fork and knife and pretended privacy was my choice. Across the room, mothers were seated near the cameras. A seat is a chair on a diagram, I told myself, not a verdict. Lydia, Rachel's mother, arrived with the timing of a stage actress. Guests praised the flowers and the quartet. She accepted with a small practiced dip of the head. She hugged Matthew, pressed her cheek to his, then lifted her eyes to survey the room. Host, curator, queen. I understood my place in a kingdom that preferred symmetry over intimacy. The officiant cleared his throat. The quartet began the processional. Rachel appeared at the far doors in a gown that made the room hush. I tilted until the column cut the frame like a curtain. The veil drifted like a pale river, then slid out of my sightline. Matthew stood with that mixture of pride and fear men wear when a life is about to be rearranged. I thought of the day he held the level for Benjamin and how his hands shook. A woman sat beside me without asking. She said she was a cousin on Lydia's side and asked for the powder room. I pointed to the lobby. She glanced at my place card. "Oh, you're Matthew's mother. How sweet." Then she explained the signature cocktail as if teaching a child and drifted away. The vows floated around the column like a radio signal from another town. I caught the words that always matter. For better, for worse, for as long as we both shall live. I repeated them and felt the weight Benjamin and I carried across ordinary years. People think vows are fireworks. Benjamin knew they are patience, endurance, and the long drive home after bad news. The kiss drew cheers. I clapped into the greenery and felt magnolia petals brush my wrists. Cocktail hour rose like a tide toward the bar. A waiter set down appetizers that looked like jewelry. Matthew approached, and Lydia steered him toward a couple in navy suits. "Opportunity is waiting," her smile said. I practiced being present without interruption. An usher asked if I needed anything. I asked whether the arrangement could shift an inch so I might see the first dance. He studied the flowers like an altar and apologized. "Fire code," he said. I asked for a cushion instead. He brought one quickly and looked relieved I had not asked him to break a rule. Matthew found me long enough to kiss my forehead and promise he would come back after the toasts. "You look handsome," I said. "Thanks, Mom," he replied. The words fell like coins through a slot. Precise, correct, already spent. I chose a blessing over a question and let him go. The grand entrance began. Everyone rose. I stood a beat late, caught between chair and column. The couple took the floor. All I saw was a border of lace and the brief plane of Matthew's shoulder. I applauded too. My hands met and parted like a quiet metronome. I smiled because smiling costs nothing and prevents explanations. Dinner arrived with speeches. Lydia's toast sparkled. She thanked everyone for honoring the union of two families and told a story about Rachel rescuing a stray dog in college. Laughter and sniffles followed. When it was my turn, I kept it brief. I spoke of Matthew's first toolbox and the day he learned to keep the bubble between the lines. I lifted my glass and sat before anyone could decide how they felt about me. As cake was plated, I understood my assignment. I had been placed where I could do no harm to the photographs, a quiet placeholder to complete the grid. A photographer asked me to lean toward the aisle so the lens could catch a sliver of my smile. I obliged. The image would confirm the chart. Present enough to count, distant enough not to alter the frame. When the dancing swelled again, I remained in my chair and watched lights spin across the ceiling like coins in a fountain. The music gathered people into circles that opened and closed without me. I did not take it personally. I counted beats, mapped exits, and rehearsed the line I use when leaving early is the dignified choice. "I'm fine. I'm happy for them. I'll get a ride." Still quietly. In the space behind the column, my son was laughing. I held that sound like a lighthouse in a storm. A small, fixed point telling me where I was on a night that insisted I was only filling a seat. Benjamin placed a silver pocket watch in my hand on a Wednesday night, the last evening he knew my name. The nurse lowered the lamp. Rain tapped the window. He reached into his robe and pressed the watch into my palm, still warm from his body, faint with sandalwood and the salt of the river wind. His voice had thinned. "Keep this safe," he said. "Use it when you need to, not when you are begged or shamed. Promise you will remember that." I closed my fingers around the metal and felt the map of our years. A small dent by the lid showed where he once slipped with a file. Benjamin never left marks by accident. He studied problems until they let go. He would not hand me this watch unless a door wanted resolve. I slipped it into my sweater pocket and sat beside him. I watched his chest row a slow current and kept my hand on his shoulder. After the funeral, people brought food and advice. I stacked pans and recycled pamphlets. Grief made the house larger, as if every hallway led to a room where I was not. The watch waited on the saucer where Benjamin kept screws and paper clips. On the 5th day, I carried it into the mahogany study. The room smelled of wood and old paper. Behind the bookcase, a wooden panel hid a safe bolted to the studs. I slid the panel aside and found the lock. The watch lid clicked open, revealing a small key hidden inside. My hands trembled. I steadied them on the settee. The key slid in and turned with a quiet click. When I opened the door, the air changed to dry paper and the faint trace of his cologne. He had folded a world into manila. Folders labeled insurance, taxes, pensions. A green ledger lay on top like a patch of sky. Inside the ledger was a letter in his careful print, the same hand that labeled coffee tins and fuse boxes. "My dearest Eleanor," it began. "If you are reading this, I am not beside you to explain. I have prepared what I could, and the rest is your judgment." He told me to call Donovan Pike, our longtime friend, an attorney on Drayton Street. Then the line that stopped me: "This is armor, not bragging." And there were statements, charts, and a trust agreement stamped by a notary. I had seen invoices and pay stubs for decades, never numbers like these. $35 million held in an irrevocable trust in my name, distributions protected from anyone who might speak for me without consent. The clauses read like a fortress. If anyone sought power of attorney without medical proof of incapacity from 2 certified specialists, the assets would remain insulated. Mercy written with a steel spine. I sat on the wooden stool Benjamin used for sanding and let the pages rest against my knees. Upstairs, the washer clicked to a stop, and the house held its breath. What unsettled me was knowing he built all this while still laughing over coupons and choosing the cheap seats. He hid abundance in plain sight and kept mending the fence. I brushed his signature and felt the last lesson. Protection can be humble and strong. The letter went on. He reminded me of the month my mother was ill and he slept on a hospital chair. He wrote that a family is guarded not by speeches, but by paperwork and steady hands. He apologized for secrecy and refused shame. He said love sometimes requires silence until the right question is asked by the right person. He asked forgiveness for dying first and for being right about kindness, read as weakness. At the bottom, he wrote one sentence in the plain language he used for hard choices. "If you say nothing, you will see who speaks for you." I pressed the page to my chest and let the light blur. A small envelope was clipped to the letter. Inside was a spare key and a photograph of us at the county fair. I wore a wide-brimmed hat. He held lemonade. The corner was creased. I returned the documents to the safe in the order he set. I kept the letter and the contact card in a folder marked Recipes. I turned the key, slid the bookcase panel back, and wiped my fingerprints from the brass. On the stairs, I sat halfway up and breathed. The house felt no different. The refrigerator hummed. Spanish moss scratched the kitchen window where the screen frame needed a nail. Nothing had changed, and everything had. I told no one. Not Caroline, though she would have understood. Not Matthew, though he is my child. Secrets rot when they are built to flatter. This one was built to shield. I honored Benjamin by treating it as a tool, not a trumpet. I tucked the spare key into the sewing basket beneath the spools. I slipped the letter into my Bible between Psalms and Proverbs. That night, I slept with the window cracked so the rain could remember us. I laid Benjamin's navy blazer at the foot of the bed and thanked him. Money is only time made visible. With it, you can buy quiet, buy patience, and the right to say no. In the morning, I would make coffee and sweep the porch under the gas lantern as if this knowledge were ordinary. I would practice silence until it saved me and wear the armor without apology. I would keep faith with the work that built this house steady. 3 days after the wedding, the doorbell rang while the kettle hissed on the stove. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened the door to find Rachel with a man in a gray suit. She wore a cream coat and a magazine smile. He carried a briefcase. Rachel stepped in, and the man handed me a card. Ethan Cole, attorney at law. "We were just in the neighborhood," Rachel said, as if the neighborhood included conference rooms. "We thought it would be helpful to go over a few protective documents for you." Her tone was warm. Her eyes were measuring. The lawyer nodded with practiced gravity and asked if we could sit at the kitchen table. I let them in and set 3 cups because manners never expire. I poured black coffee into the magnolia china. Rachel thanked me without tasting it. The lawyer opened his briefcase and set a folder in the center. Across the first page, in bold type, it read, "Power of Attorney and Healthcare Proxy." He cleared his throat. "Mrs. Hartley, this is a standard set of instruments. They authorize your son and his spouse to assist with financial and medical decisions should the need arise. This is best practice for seniors who live alone." He smiled as if my consent were assumed. I stirred my coffee. The spoon tapped once, then rested. He kept speaking about safeguards, efficiencies, avoiding confusion. Rachel added that Matthew was worried about me. She said worried 3 times, as if repetition could become truth. Her hand settled on the folder. I asked whether they were in a hurry. Rachel glanced at the lawyer. "We have some time," she said. I nodded and let the room be quiet. The clock ticked. The heater exhaled. People will fill a quiet room with the shape of their intentions if you let them. And these two did not like the shape they made. The lawyer resumed. "With your authorization, Matthew can help streamline payments and investments. This is a burden you shouldn't have to carry. We can have a notary here today," he said. Today, as if it were superior to all others. Rachel leaned forward. "It would give us peace of mind," she said. I sipped the coffee. It was too hot. I let the heat settle and did not react. I asked who drafted the documents. The lawyer said his firm adapted a template he uses for many families. I asked how many of those families began by seating a mother at table 13 behind an arch of magnolia. Rachel blinked. The attorney frowned. I did not mention the safe, or the letter, or the number I carry like a stone. I lifted the first page and read the opening paragraph. The language was gentle and absolute. It invited me to step out of my own life. I set it down and folded my arms. "Thank you for bringing this," I said. "I appreciate the concern. Before I sign anything, I'll have my attorney review every line." The attorney's pen hovered above a flagged tab. "Your attorney?" he repeated. "Yes," I said. "His name is Donovan Pike. He's thorough. I'll call him after lunch." Rachel's smile thinned. "Of course," she said, trying to sound open. The attorney adjusted his tie and said there was urgency because timing could affect evaluations and asset protection. I let that sentence sit where everyone could see it. Then I asked whether urgency meant before I had the chance to ask proper questions. He began to explain aging curves and statutes. I raised one finger. "Do not rush me. I will not sign anything I haven't read twice." Rachel's hand slid off the folder. She reached for her coffee and finally tasted it. I watched her decide whether sweetness could fix the moment. The attorney tried a softer path and asked if Matthew could join a follow-up meeting. I said Matthew is welcome to visit his mother any afternoon. If he wishes to discuss signatures, he may do so in the presence of my counsel. They both heard the line they had hoped not to hear. The attorney closed the folder a fraction. He said he admired my diligence. Rachel set the cup down with care. She said she only wanted me to be safe. I answered that safety begins with a door that locks from the inside. We sat with that until the clock spoke again. The attorney gathered his papers. He said they would be in touch later this week. At the door, Rachel squeezed my arm. "I've always respected you," she said. I nodded to save her from the echo. The gas lantern on the porch was still off. Daylight held enough truth. I walked them out and watched the briefcase catch the sun like a small shield. In the kitchen, steam still rose from my cup. I stood a while and let my pulse slow to a practical beat. Benjamin had told me to wait until the right question was asked by the right person. Today, 2 people asked the wrong question with great confidence. I rinsed the teaspoon and felt the silver pocket watch in my pocket, heavy as a coin from a country that never falls. Outside, the wind lifted ribbons of Spanish moss and oak leaves like small green flags. Today had arrived. Caroline found me on the porch the next afternoon, holding a broom I hadn't used yet. The oak threw coin-sized shadows across the steps. The coffee pot inside had just clicked off. She carried her mail and a jar of peonies. She set the jar on the rail and looked at me. "You didn't come back for cake last night," she said. I told her I'd had a headache. She stepped closer. "Did they put you behind the flowers?" she asked. I nodded. She breathed out and let the quiet do the scolding. "Caroline is a widow. Her Jack died in winter. She speaks in short sentences and lists. She touched the broom. I saw that girl with a lawyer on your porch," she said. I told her there had been a visit. She waited. I let the silence gather until the air felt heavier than the glass jar. Finally, she gave me the line I didn't know I needed. "You are not invisible." She said it like a fact. Those words traveled through skin and manners and the armor I had worn since the wedding. My throat moved once, then twice. Tears came without apology. Clean and steady, like a faucet finally unstuck. Caroline did not flinch. She guided me to the top step. "Cry," she said. "Let the wind see it." I pressed my palm under my eye and gave a short laugh because the navy dress from church still hangs on the bedroom door like a guest who refuses to leave. I told Caroline about Table 13, the column, the vase that became a wall. I told her about the folder on my table and the attorney who said today as if time belonged to him. She listened as if my sentences were nails passed across a fence. When I finished, she patted my arm the way you calm a horse. "They want you small because you make their story messy," she said. "You are not small." I thought of Benjamin measuring a sagging line and saying it could be fixed. My breath began to match the oak leaves moving above us. Inside, the house waited with its old patience. I left the broom and went to the bedroom. The closet smelled faintly of cedar and starch. Benjamin's navy blazer hung where I left it, sleeves rolled, collar softened by years. I slid it from the hanger and pressed it to my face. The fabric carried his Sunday cologne, wood and soap, and effort. I stood very still and let memory take the lead. For months, I had kept grief on a short leash. I feared that if I let go, I would not find the way back. The blazer asked nothing. It returned a man to a room. I sat on the edge of the bed and smoothed the cuff with my thumb. I saw Benjamin teaching Matthew to sand with the grain. The boy's forearms dusted pale, Benjamin patient as a tide. I remembered the night Benjamin pressed the silver pocket watch into my palm. The scent on his wrist was the same as on this cloth. He whispered, "Use it when you need to, not when you are begged or shamed." I whispered back that I would. In the closet light, the stitching looked like a map. Each line a street we had walked. The inside pocket, a place to keep a note you do not want to lose. Caroline stood in the doorway with peonies. "Keep these in the kitchen," she said. "Let the house know it is still being lived in. If they come again, call me before you answer." I told her I would. I stayed with the blazer. I folded it the way Benjamin liked, sleeves tucked, buttons aligned. I set it on the chair where he used to drop his keys. The keys are gone. The chair remains. The silence had changed since Caroline spoke. It no longer felt like exile. It felt like space held open for a choice. I washed my face, put on lipstick, and brewed a fresh pot of coffee. In the steam, I heard Benjamin's instruction. Do not waste yourself proving you exist. When the coffee pot clicked again, I carried a cup to the porch. The broom leaned where I left it. I picked it up and began to sweep. Each stroke gathered leaves and grit into a small line. I breathed and kept sweeping gently. Work steadied me. Order returned to the boards. Across the fence, Caroline's kitchen light came on. I knew she would watch this night and the next. I said the words aloud so the air could hold them with me. I am not invisible. The oak, with its Spanish moss, kept its counsel. The street stayed ordinary. That was enough to begin. My son knocked on a Tuesday evening while the gas lantern on the porch was off. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened the door. Matthew stood there alone in a thin jacket, keys turning on a ring like a worry stone. I stepped back to let him in. The house smelled like black coffee and lemon oil. He sat at the kitchen table. I poured him a mug and waited. When he finally spoke, the words came careful. "Rachel thinks we should get the paperwork done," he said, "just to be safe, in case something happens." He nudged the mug but did not drink. I took the chair across from him. I asked which paperwork. He said the kind Ethan brought, power of attorney, healthcare proxy. It would make everything smooth. He used that word like a promise. "Smooth for whom?" I asked. For all of us, he said. I let the silence spread between us. You know I've handled my own bills for decades, I said. I kept ledgers for a store with more accounts than this house will ever see. He nodded quickly. Of course, you're great with numbers. This isn't about numbers, Mom. It's about safety. I stirred my coffee, then set the spoon down. Safety is a good word, I said. It has many owners. Tell me the truth, Matthew. Do you believe I need those documents now, or are you afraid to disappoint your wife? He looked at me, then really looked. He turned the keys again. He opened his mouth and closed it. He pressed his lips together and shook his head once, as if erasing a thought he was not allowed to keep. I waited. I kept waiting. Maybe it would help us coordinate, he said. If there were an emergency, we wouldn't have to scramble. Ethan can bring a notary this week. I kept my eyes on his hands, the keys dug into his palm. I knew that grip from the day he learned to drive and held the wheel too tight. Now I said nothing and let him wander to his own conclusion. He did not find it. You're afraid of Rachel being angry, I said. He glanced toward the hall. She's under stress, he said. The wedding, the move, her job, she worries about you being alone. I nodded. People often rename control as care. He flinched. He reached for the sugar and poured a small mountain into his coffee without stirring. He kept his eyes low, avoiding mine. She talked to friends. Everyone does this now. Their parents sign and it's fine. And I asked if any of those parents had been seated behind flowers the night their children married. He winced. That was the planner, he said. I did not argue about flowers. I said his name. He looked up. I asked again, do you truly think I need to sign, or are you trying to avoid a fight at home? His silence was complete. No defense, no explanation, only a son who knew the difference and could not say it aloud. Something shifted inside my chest, a slow tear only I could hear. When he finally spoke, his voice came small. I just want peace, he said. I nodded. Peace is priceless. It's also expensive when you pay for it with someone else's life. He stared at the table. The sugar still sat on the surface of his coffee like sand in shallow water. I told him I would have my attorney review anything set before me. Of course, he said, though the word sounded like a door closing. He asked if he could at least bring Ethan by again. I said he could visit me any time, and if Ethan wished to come, he could bring his card, and his patience. We sat a while in the room that once held spelling lists and model airplanes. I wanted to put my hand over his, to tell him I could bear his fear if he would only tell the truth. But the kindest thing I could offer my son was a boundary he could lean against when the wind from his marriage blew too hard. He stood and pushed the chair in with a care that made me proud and sad at once. He said he would call tomorrow. I said I would be here. At the door, he hugged me quickly. His keys pressed cold against my shoulder. After he left, I rinsed the cups and dried them with a dish towel. I walked to the bedroom and opened the closet. Benjamin's navy blazer hung where I left it. I pressed my face to the sleeve and breathed. The sandalwood had faded, but not gone. I whispered the question only the dead can hold without judgment. How do I love a son who cannot stand up for me? The room answered in patient air. You love him by standing up for yourself. I folded the blazer and placed it on the chair. Back in the kitchen, the sugar. I watched the cup a moment, then stirred the coffee. Sometimes the only mercy you can give is to show how the swirl feels. The spoon traced slow circles until the surface smoothed and the sweetness disappeared into the heat. Rachel's text arrived at 7:12 a.m., just as the coffee pot began to crackle. We'll swing by Friday with a notary, quick signatures, simple protection. Matthew agrees. I set the phone down and let the whistle climb. When it fell quiet, I typed a single line. Please wait for my attorney. I did not send it. Silence can be a bridge when the other side feels unsafe. I called Donovan Pike on the landline Benjamin installed before towers ruled the sky. Donovan answered on the second ring. I told him about the visit, the folder, the bold words across the top. He listened, then gave me the sentence I needed. A signature is a battlefield. Never sign with a shaking hand. I chose my kitchen table. Soon he parked and came in with a briefcase and a thermos. He opened a pad. "Let's see what Benjamin built," he said. I brought the green ledger and the folders from the safe behind the bookcase, and the letter in Benjamin's neat print. Donovan read the trust first. "Irrevocable," he said. "Successor trustee named. 2 certified specialists trigger any transfer. This is a fortress. We will still check every window." We started with titles. He listed tasks in tidy lines. Retitle the house to the Hartley Family Trust. Record a memorandum at the Chatham County Recorder's Office. Confirm the parcel numbers match the deed. He called Savannah Riverbank while I authorized him to speak. He confirmed beneficiary designations and payable on death (POD) forms and added a note: "No changes accepted by phone, in person only, with 2 employee signatures required." He created a voice password to verify me that would never travel by email. He examined my existing power of attorney. It was springing, requiring 2 board-certified physicians to declare incapacity. He underlined that twice. "We keep this," he said. "Anyone pressing for a blanket durable power today isn't worried about your health. They're worried about access." Medical directives came next. We updated my healthcare proxy. Caroline would be first call if I could not speak. Matthew would remain second. Donovan added a HIPAA release. He jokingly calls it a hippo release, so doctors could talk to Caroline without delay. He suggested a sentence that felt like me. "Eleanor chooses comfort when cure is futile." Plain words. No room for theater. Identity and account hygiene followed. Donovan keeps a checklist for widows: freeze credit, set fraud alerts, add voice passwords, unlist the landline, strip my birthday from any page. "People imagine thieves in alleys," he said. "The lazier ones carry clipboards." We reviewed my will. He added a no-contest clause firm enough to make an opportunist count to 10. We sealed a letter of instruction naming the safe behind the bookcase, the silver pocket watch, and the spare key in the sewing basket, along with Donovan's office number. He drafted a door card that read, verbatim, "I never sign documents presented without counsel. All communications go through my attorney. Drafts due 48 hours in advance." By noon, the table looked like a command post. Donovan capped his pen and gave me homework. Call the Chatham County Recorder's Office. Schedule a notary of my choosing for any documents we initiate. Keep a log of every contact from Ethan or Rachel with the date, time, and exact phrasing. He smiled. Logs win arguments with people who polish their memories. Only then did I answer Rachel. "Please coordinate with my attorney, Donovan Pike. He will schedule any meeting." I sent Donovan's Drayton Street office number. 2 minutes later, Ethan replied that Friday was ideal. Donovan answered first. "Friday will not work. All communications through counsel. Provide drafts 48 hours in advance." The digital air went still. Donovan reached for his coat, then paused. "You don't owe anyone a performance of gratitude for protecting yourself," he said. "If they call you paranoid, call it prudent. If they call you cruel, call it clear." He squeezed my shoulder and left by the side door. I went to the closet and touched Benjamin's navy blazer. The fabric still held a faint trace of sandalwood. I pressed my forehead to the shoulder and thanked him without words. Armor means little until someone teaches you how to wear it. Donovan had adjusted the straps. Back at the table, I labeled a binder, notary plan. Inside, I placed copies of the Hartley Family Trust, the updated POA, the will, the contact log, and the door card. I added a pen that writes when stored upside down. Donovan says, "Soldiers use these." I wrote the security passphrase on an ivory note card and tucked it into my wallet between the library card and a list for rice and apples. Late light spread across the sink. My phone buzzed again. Rachel sent a heart and this line, "So glad we're on the same page." I let the message sit. A page isn't binding until the ink is dry. I rinsed the porcelain coffee pot and set it on the burner. When the flame caught, the house seemed to nod. The oak draped in Spanish moss tapped a rhythm on the glass. The clock kept time. I drafted a note to myself on the yellow pad. "Hold your line. Ask for drafts. Speak in complete sentences." I slid it under a shell-shaped magnet on the fridge. Then I squared the stack of papers until the edges aligned. Friday would come when it wished. I would meet it on my terms. I lifted the magnolia cup and let the coffee burn a clean path down my throat. Warmth is a courage you can make in a kitchen. I sat at the kitchen table long after Donovan had gone. The papers were neatly stacked in the new binder labeled Notary Plan. The house was quiet except for the slow tick of the clock above the stove. The silence pressed in, not hostile but heavy. I reached for the yellow legal pad he'd left, and instead of making another list, I began to write a letter. Not one I would ever mail, but one my heart demanded. A letter to Benjamin. My dearest Benjamin, tonight I'm writing to you the way I used to when you shipped out. Do you remember those little notes I'd tuck in your case? A folded square of paper, nothing more than a line or two. Be safe. Hurry home. The magnolias bloomed. Now you are gone and the distance is not a week or two. It is the rest of my life. Still, I write because it feels like the only way to sit beside you again. Today, your son came to me, Benjamin, our son, Matthew. He sat in the chair across from me, twisting his keys like a boy caught lying. He asked me to sign papers. He said it was just to be sure, just to be safe. But what I heard was doubt. He doubts me. Or worse, he fears his wife will be angry if he doesn't press me. I searched his face for the boy who used to run down the brick walk shouting, "Mom, watch me!" I found only silence. Do you know what it feels like to be questioned in your own kitchen? To have the life I built with you reduced to a stack of signatures they can slide across a table? I have never felt smaller than I did in that moment, watching him struggle to meet my eyes. And yet, I did not shout. I did not cry in front of him. I saved the tears for you here in these lines. You always believed in careful preparation. Every check balanced, every receipt filed, every tool put back where it belonged. Order is respect, you used to say. I held to that today. Donovan came, and together we fortified what you left. The Hartley family trust you built is sound, Benjamin. It is a fortress, just as you said. But battles aren't only fought in banks or courts. They're fought inside the heart. And I am tired. I wish you could have been at the wedding. You would have hated the way they tucked me behind the magnolia arch. Benjamin, table 13. I was hidden as if the years of raising Matthew, of saving pennies, of standing beside you under oaks draped with Spanish moss, counted for nothing more than a seat filler. Everyone watched Lydia Crane glow like a queen while I tried to disappear into my chair. I didn't want to shame Matthew with my disappointment, so I smiled into my napkin. But inside, I felt like an old coat hung in the wrong closet. I miss your steadiness. I miss the way you would rest your hand on mine when the room felt too loud. No one does that for me now. Caroline Brooks has been trying, the neighbor with the gentle voice. This week she told me, "You are not invisible." Those words cracked me open. I sobbed in her kitchen like a girl. I realized I've been carrying this loneliness like a stone in my chest. Benjamin, I am frightened by how Matthew has changed. Or maybe it isn't change. Maybe it's weakness exposed. He knows his wife is pushing, and he cannot stand firm against her. I wanted to believe he would protect me the way you once did, but perhaps that was a fantasy only mothers are foolish enough to hold. Still, I will not let bitterness rule me. You taught me that too. When the back garden took a salt storm one year and we lost nearly everything, you said, "We start again." Soil remembers. My soil remembers, Benjamin. My heart remembers who I am. I will not sign away the last of my dignity. I touched your navy blazer today, the one you wore when you mended the picket fence. It still holds your sandalwood, faint but real. When I pressed it to my face, I could almost hear your voice. I imagined you saying, "Stand tall, Ellie. This is only a storm. Let it pass, but do not bend until you break." I am trying, Benjamin. I promise you I am trying. I will keep this letter in the safe with the others. Perhaps no one will ever read it. But if someday Matthew finds it after I am gone, maybe he will understand the cost of his silence. Maybe he will know how much his mother loved him, even when that love went unanswered. Good night, Benjamin. Thank you for the legal armor you left me. Thank you for believing I was strong enough to wear it. I will hold the line for both of us. Always, Eleanor. I set the pen down and stared at the words until they blurred. Then I folded the pages carefully and slipped them into the envelope with Benjamin's letter. The safe closed with its familiar click, and I rested my forehead against the cool steel door. It was not a victory, not yet. But it was a confession made, a truth spoken, if only to the dead. For the first time in weeks, I felt lighter, as if Benjamin had reached through the dark to steady me once more. They came back on a bright afternoon when the oaks draped in Spanish moss threw little coins of light across the porch. I saw them through the screen. No attorney, no briefcase. Only Matthew with his shoulders pitched forward and Rachel holding her phone like a passport. I opened the door and stepped aside. The house smelled faintly of porcelain coffee pot and lemon polish. I had already set out 3 magnolia cups. Old habits seat everyone. Rachel spoke before the Coates found the hooks. She said they had talked and decided the legal visit last time felt too formal. Families shouldn't need lawyers to love one another. She said the notary could still come Friday. It would be quick, a kindness to me, true peace of mind. She said their pastor recommended clarity. Also, her friend Jenna had done this for her father. It was simple and everyone slept better. She said Matthew was worried and she hated to see him crushed between responsibilities. Matthew stood behind her and spun his key ring once. It clicked and stilled. He said he thought it would help. Emergencies happen. No one wants confusion. He glanced past my shoulder toward the clock, as if the hour could rescue him. I told them to sit. I set the cups on saucers and did not touch mine. I let the porcelain's soft breath be the first voice in the room. Rachel began listing the documents again. Durable power for finances, medical decisions, a small list of assets that would be easier under one hand. She said it as if pain were a math problem. I listened. When she asked if I agreed, I lifted a palm the way a crossing guard stops a line of cars. I asked one question. Why the hurry? She laughed lightly. Life is a hurry. The world is unpredictable. No one plans a fall. I asked another question. Why me alone? That one she did not laugh at. She said that because Matthew is my only child, he should be the one. Because I live alone. Because I seem tired. Tired lives near insult, but is not yet insult. It pretends concern while counting your steps. I nodded as if the word were a weather report. I turned to Matthew. I asked whether he had read the papers. He said Ethan had. He trusted Ethan. Ethan does this all the time. I felt the old ledger in my hands. I asked which clause prevented misuse. He blinked and looked to Rachel as if she could locate the answer in her contacts. I stood and went to the hutch. From the second drawer, I took the green ledger binder with the tab Donovan had labeled. I set it on the table and squared the corners with my fingers. Gold notary seals and a strip of wax stamp lay across the top like a quiet boundary. I kept my voice soft so it would carry. Benjamin provided for me in ways you cannot imagine. You can take care of each other, but I do not need anyone to take care of me. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Matthew's shoulders fell a fraction, as if air had been let out of a tire. Rachel stared at the gilded seals, then at my hands. She asked, "What was inside?" "What mattered," I said. "Protections Benjamin built, instructions I am following, counsel that is mine." Rachel smiled. The smile did not reach her eyes. She said she was glad I had guidance, then added that none of that changed the wisdom of a simple signature. I slid an ivory card beside the magnolia cups, its black letters clean. I read it aloud so there would be no confusion. I never sign documents presented without counsel. All communications go through my attorney. Meetings are scheduled. Drafts are provided 48 hours in advance. That is my boundary. It is not up for negotiation. Rachel's hand hovered above the card. She didn't touch it. "Boundaries are wonderful," she said. She said she respected mine. She said, "Respect is a two-way bridge." Then she said, "This would be easier if you could show trust." The word slipped and hit the floor with a sound only I heard. Trust as if it belonged to the side asking for a pen. I let my silence answer. It did more than any speech. Matthew finally reached for his cup. He forgot the sugar and drank. He said he never wanted to hurt me. He said he wanted peace. I said peace is not always the same as obedience. He kept his eyes on the table and nodded as if the wood might forgive him. Rachel shifted to a softer key. She spoke about holidays, about family photographs, about how stress fades when roles are clear. She said I deserved ease. I remembered the magnolia arch at the reception and how ease had been arranged for the camera, not for me. I asked them to listen to one sentence without interrupting. I said, I will continue to manage my house and my health as I have. I will ask for help when I need it. I will not sign a blanket power of attorney. And if a medical crisis ever comes, the springing documents in the green binder will speak with my voice. That is what Benjamin wanted. That is what I want now. I ended the sentence there and let the air hold it. Rachel stood. She thanked me for the coffee. She said she was sorry if she'd pushed. She said Friday could wait. Matthew stayed seated and looked at my face the way he used to study a map before a long drive. He asked if I was angry. I said, no, I am careful. Careful is what kept this family whole when money was thin and the days were long. He nodded slowly and slid the keys into his pocket. This time they made no sound. At the door, Rachel said she hoped we could revisit this later. I said later belongs to people who respect today. She tried to laugh and let it go. They walked toward the car. The oak shook once through the Spanish moss and steadied. I returned to the kitchen and sat. The coffee was still warm. A faint curl of steam rose and vanished. I watched it fade and knew the balance had shifted. Benjamin's armor did not clang or shine. It made a quiet click the moment a door locked from the inside. After they left, I stayed at the table with the green binder and the cooling cup and asked the question I had been avoiding. Can I forgive this? Should I cut my son off? The words sounded harsh in my own head. They stumbled on the stair between anger and grief. Forgiveness, for me, has always been a kitchen practice. Small acts repeated until a stain lifts. Cutting off felt like hauling the whole table to the curb. I sat very still and watched the steam disappear as if it were a demonstration of time. The house answered with its usual patience. Pipes sighed. The clock kept its stubborn rhythm. I walked to the sink, rinsed the cup, and folded the dish towel twice. My hands reached for Benjamin's old habits without asking me. Order first, then feeling. Still, the feeling would not wait. I leaned on the counter and let it rise. When Matthew was 6, he burned with a fever that would not break. Benjamin was on a job 2 ports away. The wind hammered the eaves, the power flickered and held. I made a nest on the living room floor with quilts and towels warmed in the dryer. Matthew's cheeks were the red of hard candy. I pressed the thermometer, wiped his hairline with a damp cloth, and whispered the plain promises mothers whisper when only the stove is listening. I will stay. I am here. My body remembers the weight of him that night, the way he curled against me like a heartbeat outside my chest. I counted breaths until they steadied. When the fever finally slid down, I cried into the quilt where he could not feel the shake. Morning brought cereal and cartoons. He did not remember the storm. I remembered it for both of us. That night taught me something I did not have words for until now. A mother holds the line when the child cannot. The line is not always a wall. Sometimes it is a fence with a working latch. You open it for the right reasons. You close it when the wind howls. Today the wind howled in a polite voice with bullet points. Today I closed the latch. But closing the latch is not the same as closing the heart. So again the question, can I forgive him? Forgiveness, as I understand it, is not a pardon. It is the refusal to build a shrine to injury. It lets the wound breathe without inviting the knife back in. I can forgive weakness. I cannot hand over the keys to my life because weakness asks for them. I have to live long enough to watch him learn the difference. I remembered when Matthew came home in 3rd grade with a backpack strap ripped and a story that would not settle. He said the older boys grabbed his straps and spun him on the blacktop. He laughed when he told it, the laugh children use when they are testing if a hurt is allowed. The next morning, I walked him to school and stood in the yard without speaking. The boys circled again and found my eyes first. I didn't shout. I stepped between them and Matthew and said one sentence: "Find a different game." They did. He held my hand all the way to the classroom door as if I had changed the weather. That's the mother I've always been. Quiet, but not absent. Clear, but not cruel. So what is the line now? It is legal paper, yes. The Hartley Family Trust, the springing power of attorney, the door card Donovan drafted. But it is also the words I will and will not say. I will not call Rachel names. I will not rehearse speeches to win the room. I will not pretend this didn't hurt. When Matthew asks again, I will say I am careful because careful kept us fed. I will say love without boundaries turns into theater. I will say my signature is not a token of peace. It is the map of my life. No one else holds the legend. Should I cut him off? The truth is, I don't know a clean way to sever that rope without losing myself in the fall. If he were a stranger, the answer would be simple. But love is not a contract you cancel with a stamped envelope. It is a house you keep repairing because you remember the day you first raised the walls. Sometimes you stop using a room. You don't burn it down. I took Benjamin's navy blazer from the chair and folded it with the solemnity of a ritual. The cloth still carried sandalwood, a little citrus, and soap. I asked him as if he had just set the silver pocket watch on the tray and walked into the kitchen. "What would you do?" I heard him say it the way he always did, when the fix was both simple and hard. Check the latch, check it again, sleep. Decide in daylight. I wrote Matthew's name on an ivory card, and beneath it, 3 sentences I could say without shaking. I love you. I will not sign. I will always answer when you call me with respect. I slid the card under the shell magnet on the fridge so it faced the room like a small flag. Magnolia leaves scraped the kitchen window asking for water. I filled the can and gave each root a slow drink. The soil in Savannah remembers. I can forgive the boy who twists a keyring in his palm looking for peace. I can forgive and still keep the gate locked until he learns to knock. That is the shape of my mercy. It has hinges, it swings, it holds. The house made its familiar night sounds. Pipes settled. The clock beat out quarters like a stubborn metronome. I turned off the lamps. The gas lantern on the porch left a pale square at the sink. I stood in that light as if on a small ferry and let cold water run over my hands. The day had been a field of fences. Night arrived with no gate. I dried my hands, walked the hall, and opened the closet. Benjamin's blazer waited on its hanger like a faithful dog. Cotton linen thinned at the elbows. The lapel kept the faint shape of his neck. I pressed my cheek to the shoulder and breathed. Sandalwood, citrus, soap, quiet traces of a life that believed time and calm could fix most things. I carried the blazer to the bed and sat. The mattress tilted as if expecting weight on the other side. Finding none, I drew my knees up and tucked the hem beneath my chin. Until then, I had cried like someone pretending not to. Tidy tears that could pass for allergies. Then the dam I'd built out of routine, lists, and porcelain coffee that steamed just so, cracked straight through. A sound left me that startled me. Not delicate, not polite. A deep animal sob that rattled the bed frame and made the lamp chatter. I clutched the blazer and had to say it out loud, because whispering would not hold it. "Do you see, Ben? We raised a son who no longer dares to look his mother in the eye." The sentence bounced off the wall and came back smaller, but it did not leave. I said it again, slower, like driving a nail that needs a few sure strikes. I carried him. I walked floors with him. I held fevers that would not break. I taught him to say please and to keep the bubble between the lines. And when a storm came wearing a suit, he chose the forecast over the window. The room did not argue. The blazer did not soften the fact. My throat burned. My ribs ached where the crying pushed. I lay on my side and curled around the cloth. I built a harbor and called it Benjamin. I told him about Table 13, how flowers can become walls when people decide they are, about the planner who forgot to measure a mother. I told him about the green binder on the kitchen table, about a stranger who used the word today like a threat, about how Rachel stacked care and control into the same sentence and asked me to sign under both. I told him I had held my ground and how I hated that I had to do it in front of our son. The crying came in layers. Fury first, then shame for feeling fury at my own child, then grief for the boy who used to press a damp forehead to my collarbone and fall asleep as if a mother were a private sky. I remembered the fever night, the wind whistling through the vent, the promise I made to stay, a promise that required no witnesses, no signatures. Tonight, I kept that promise by guarding the line he will need later when peace means something real. The clock marked another quarter. I rolled onto my back and stared at the ceiling where the porch lantern drew a thin ladder of pale rectangles. I climbed them with my eyes until the ache in my chest eased to a low thrum. I spoke to Benjamin as if he lay beside me and could catch each word before it fell. I told him I was afraid of becoming hard. I told him I was afraid of becoming a fool. If I had to carry one fear for a season, which would he choose? The room held the question like a guest who needed water. Wind moved through the old oaks. Spanish moss rasped a kiss along the glass. A magnolia branch scratched the pane with a sound like a match along a box. I closed my eyes and let the scrape repeat until it became a kind of lullaby. I pressed my palm to the navy blazer and felt the metal buttons against my skin, small, round, ordinary, steadfast. I remembered sewing one back on while Benjamin read the ship's log in blue ink, the way work and love sat at the same table without ceremony. I told myself, softness is not the enemy of strength. It is the reason strength matters. Another wave rose. I didn't fight it. I let the rough sobs come until my breath frayed and then gathered again. When the tide receded, I spoke to the room in my own voice. I said I would not break myself to make his marriage easier. I would not turn my life into a cushion for someone else's fear. I would forgive when I could and keep the latch closed until he learns to knock. The house listened. The clock kept time. I thought of sorrow as a shore I could reach if I stopped thrashing and floated. I slid the blazer under the pillow and smoothed the quilt. I did not feel brave, only emptied, rinsed, a bowl set upside down to dry. Emptiness was not a threat. It was space for daylight to land. I turned off the last lamp and let the room go a gentle blue. I said goodnight to Benjamin as if he were just in the next room. I said, "Thank you for the armor." I said, "Keep watch while I sleep." Then I slept, not deeply, but honestly, with salt on my cheeks and warm cloth in my hands. Morning slipped into the room before I opened my eyes, a pale ribbon across the mirror, quiet as apology. My face felt tight. The salt remained. I sat up, touched the blazer under the pillow, folded it once, and set it on the chair. No speeches to the empty room. Breathe in, breathe out, feet to the floor. In the kitchen, the porcelain coffee pot waited like a promise I could keep. I washed my face at the sink, cold water, and patted it dry with a towel that smelled faintly of lemon. I watched my hands as if they belonged to someone I trusted. I measured coffee, lit the flame, and let the ordinary sounds scaffold my grief. The clock, sparrows in the hedge, the low hum of the refrigerator. When the pot sighed, I poured into a magnolia cup and added a slice of ginger. I carried the mug to the back steps and watched sunlight lace through the oaks, draped with Spanish moss. The world had not changed. The truth had. I felt the ache without canonizing it, just a nod. You can be tender and still choose steel. I said the day's work aloud. Call Donovan. Sign what strengthens. Record what stands. Protect what breathes. Donovan Pike answered on the second ring. I told him I was ready to finish what we'd outlined. His voice was warm, brisk, kind. "Good," he said. "Meet me at 9 on Drayton Street. Bring your ID, the green binder, and that calm you do better than anyone." I slipped on a light blazer, brushed my hair, and slid Benjamin's silver pocket watch into my jacket like a talisman. At 9, I parked behind Donovan's office, a bright painted cottage with a gas lantern on the porch and old nautical charts on the walls. Inside, Elma, the notary, waited with a steady face, a box of gold seals, and a tin of sealing wax. Donovan spread the documents across the polished mahogany like a chart. "Last pass," he said. "We read, we sign, we seal, then we record at the Chatham County Recorder's Office. We start with the deed to the Hartley Family Trust." He slid the deed and the county memo across. I read every line. My name looked back like horizon. I signed slow and legible. And Elma set the embosser. Press, lift, a sound like a soft gavel. Gold seals bloomed on the page. Next came the updated healthcare proxy and HIPAA release. We confirmed Caroline Brooks as first call. Matthew remained second. Donovan tapped the trigger paragraph. 2 certified specialists must affirm incapacity. "We keep the springing POA," he said. "No open doors, only doors that open when you ask." I signed. Elma sealed. The shining circles gathered like small moons. We reviewed my will with the no contest clause tightened. Donovan added a short letter of intent about the house and the roses. My wish that the magnolia and the garden remain. "It won't bind a court," he said, "but it will bind consciences." I signed. Elma stamped, then dripped red wax onto the envelope holding the letter of instruction. Where the safe sits behind the bookcase, the pocket watch, the spare key in the sewing basket, and Donovan's number. And the seal rose like a quiet oath. "Chatham County Recorder's Office," Donovan said. "Then Savannah River Bank, then Dr. Patel's clinic. 3 stops." We gathered the packets into the green binder. Each tab was labeled in a font Benjamin would have called sensible. At the recorder's office, the clerk handed us a number. The lobby smelled of rubber mats and copies. When our turn came, she scanned the deed and the memorandum into the trust, set them on a pad, and stamped them with a square red seal. Thud, lift, thud. The sound satisfied something deep, not theatrical, official. "Recorded," she said, sliding a receipt under the glass. I thanked her as if she'd returned something I had dropped. At Savannah River Bank, the manager led us into a room with frosted glass. Donovan spoke until I needed to, then I did. We set a voice password, added a note. No changes by phone, all changes in person with 2 employees present. We confirmed PIOD beneficiaries aligned with the Hartley Family Trust. The manager printed a summary and asked about a safe deposit box. "Yes," I said. He handed me a slender key. I liked its weight. Ordinary. Final. Our last stop was Dr. Patel's office. The receptionist scanned the proxy and HIPAA release and verified Caroline's number. "If the day comes," she said, "we'll call who you asked us to call." Another red stamp. Another small thud. Back on Drayton Street, we sat a moment in the quiet, the green binder between us like a finished roof. Donovan poured coffee from his thermos and handed me a cup. "You did everything right," he said. "People confuse loud with strong. What you just did, that's strong." I looked at the tabs, the seals, the signatures lined like stitches. Strength, I thought, is paperwork that doesn't tremble when someone knocks. I stood, slipped the green binder into my tote. Benjamin's silver pocket watch pressed its weight against the bag's side. In the doorway, I planted the words I needed to live by. I will not cry today. I will stand by the red seal. Donovan nodded as if I'd spoken a binding oath. Outside, the air smelled of lilac and exhaust. The day moved on errands and buses, lives that would never know a woman had just secured her life with ink and patience. I set the binder on the passenger seat, rested a hand on it for a beat, then drove home steady in my lane, past the old school where I once kept the days in order, toward the gas lantern on my porch, where a door card with my boundary now waits to speak for me before my mouth ever has to. I saw them before they saw me. Rachel and her mother, Lydia Crane, standing by a white SUV outside the Pharmacy Cafe on Whitaker Street. The windows were down. March wind carried every word across the lot. I had come for stamps and aspirin. I stayed, because truth often arrives when people think no one is listening. Rachel held her phone like a stone. Lydia gripped the wheel with both hands as if leverage could fix a bill. "We can't keep floating balances," Lydia said. "The planner wants another payment. The florist says the card bounced. Jenna's husband is asking about the money we borrowed for the venue." Rachel's voice thinned. "It's temporary. Ethan says if Eleanor signs, Matthew can consolidate the debt. We can roll the cards, clear the wedding, cover the deposit. I just need her to stop being difficult. Lydia clicked her tongue. Difficult is the word people use when they meet a boundary. Your boutique is 3 months behind. The landlord wants certified funds. Your student loans come out of forbearance this quarter. I know, Rachel whispered. Every night I grind my teeth. I can't breathe till morning. Ethan says it's standard. Everyone does POA now. It keeps elders safe. I'm trying to make us safe. Safe bent like wire under weight. Lydia exhaled. We built an image, and now we have to pay for the frame. I warned you about champagne taste. Matthew is kind but soft. You're steering this. Steer well. Rachel pressed her fist to her mouth. I didn't plan to beg an old woman. I'm not a thief. I just need a door to open. A boy pushed a line of carts. Metal rang against metal. I stepped behind the newspaper rack. I didn't want to be seen or forced to perform. This wasn't theater. This was weather finally speaking. Lydia lowered her voice. You'll apologize. You'll smile on Friday. You'll tell her it's love. Use the word care. It tests well. Rachel shook her head. She looked through me like glass. I saw myself, and I didn't like the view. They pulled away without seeing me. I walked in and bought stamps and aspirin. Red forever stamps? Hearts or flags? The clerk asked. I chose flags. Out in the lot, the wind tasted like rain. I didn't feel pity strong enough to bend my line. Desperation is not virtue. It's only speed. I understood Rachel a little more, but that didn't make her right. I slid the stamps into my wallet and told myself the same sentence I'd told Matthew. Peace without respect is theater. I would not perform. I can offer empathy without surrender, understanding without permission. She is not a monster. She is a mirror of hunger. A mirror does not get my keys. I drove home and brewed tea slowly. The next morning, I carried the green binder and a manila envelope to the post office on Whitaker. The sky was a dull cloth of gray. I parked, locked the car, and stood a moment with my hand on the handle. A door is a choice. You can linger or you can step through. I stepped in. The line was long enough to measure a life. A toddler banged a roll of tape on the counter. A man in a denim jacket filled out a money order. Fluorescents hummed. I wrote the addresses in careful print. Chatham County Recorder's Office, Savannah River Bank, Compliance, Dr. Patel's Clinic. I slid the documents in and sealed the flap with a firm palm. Paper is shy. It behaves when you are sure. When my turn came, the clerk looked up with the weary cheer of someone who has seen everything. I asked for certified mail with return receipt. She handed me the green forms and a pen on a chain. I pressed my name, the addresses, and the tracking numbers until the ink looked like it meant it. She stamped the tops and peeled the barcodes like stamps for the machines. Anything fragile? She asked. Only my future, I said, and she smiled without looking surprised. She weighed the envelope, the scale blinked, she typed. The register chirped. Sign here, she said, sliding the pad. I signed the way Donovan Pike taught me, slow and legible, no flourish to imitate. The red date stamp met the corner with a satisfying thud. Official, final enough for today. I bought a strip of flag stamps for ordinary letters and tucked them beside the certified receipts. She handed me the green tracking slips and the postcards. Put these on your fridge, she said. They come back when delivered. I thought of the shell magnet holding my ivory note card. Hold your line, speak in calm sentences, and nodded. On the way out, I felt the cool metal of the handle again. Threshold, I thought. You cross, you claim. The door closed behind me with that hollow federal sound. I stood on the steps and watched the envelope slide into a canvas bin, out of my hands, into the stream. That is how power works, when you choose process over persuasion. In the car, I snapped photos of the receipts and sent them to Donovan, mailed and headed to record. He sent back a thumbs up and one line, "Good doors today." I laughed once, the quick kind that loosens the chest. I started the engine, checked my mirrors, and merged into traffic without apology. Back home, I pinned the gold-edged tracking slips to the kitchen corkboard, right beneath the door card. I never signed documents presented without counsel, All communications go through my attorney. Drafts due 48 hours in advance. I like my victories where I can reach them while I'm pouring tea into a magnolia teacup. Then I carried the binder to the safe, hidden behind the mahogany bookcase, turned Benjamin's silver pocket watch in my hand like a ritual, set the key, and listened for the soft click that says, "Welcome back." On my way to the kitchen, I touched the doorframe with my fingertips. Another threshold kept. Another small oath held by ink and seal. For now. Sunday after service, the fellowship hall at First Baptist Savannah smelled like coffee and powdered sugar from pecan pie. Folding tables wore plastic cloths. The choir ladies arranged paper plates with care. I stood near the bulletin board when Carolyn Brooks hooked her arm through mine. "Come," she said, "you need to hear something." She led me to a round table where 3 women sat. Martha had a blue scarf. Evelyn wore sturdy shoes and a bright diamond. Joyce kept the church ledger. They made space without fuss, as if my chair had always been there. Martha spoke first. "Word is you held your line," she smiled. "Around here, news travels by pecan pie." Evelyn nodded. "Men bring hammers, women bring forms." Joyce slid a napkin toward me. "Cake?" she said. "Eat while we talk." Then she opened the ledger and pointed to a page with 3 lines in blue ink. "No on the porch, counsel only. No by phone. Yes only with a witness notary." Caroline gave the outline, a bride with a lawyer, promises of care, the attempt to hide a signature that would make me small. She didn't use names. The 3 women nodded like people who already knew the song. Evelyn sipped sweet tea. "My nephew tried that after my Charlie died," she said. "He cried about scammers, asked to protect me, wanted a spare key. I gave him a copy of my will and a ride home instead." Martha smiled. "My daughter wanted me to move in. I told her I'll come for Thanksgiving and leave with my dignity." And Joyce tapped her pen on the ledger. "Paper is how quiet people speak in loud rooms," she said. "You did the brave thing." Evelyn's diamond caught the light. "Shine means nothing if the clasp isn't secure," she grinned. "You kept yours closed." Evelyn tore a slip from the fellowship hall bulletin and wrote a number. "A social worker stops by the free clinic on Tuesday," she said. "She teaches how to freeze credit, set fraud alerts, spot the tricks. Come if you like. The younger ones should hear you too." I didn't promise. I smiled. I am not a banner. I am the porch gas lantern. But my eyes felt lit from within. Around us, the choir ladies poured sweet tea and set out pecan pie. Children wove between folding tables. Someone tested the strings on the old piano. Ordinary holiness, a world moving forward as if it can be kind. Caroline touched my elbow. "You see," she whispered, "you're not alone." I looked at that circle and felt the truth settle. A chorus can hold a note. A soloist can't keep forever. I folded the napkin, slipped the number into my wallet, and stood. The church bell rang noon. I held the door for the woman behind me. The hinge sang like a small amen. I breathed and believed. He knocked mid-afternoon. No car in the drive, no shadow behind him. When I opened, Matthew stood there, thin jacket against the river wind, key ring clenched. He glanced past me as if the kitchen clock could argue his case. We sat at the kitchen table, the porcelain coffee pot and magnolia teacups breathing like a light curtain. "Mom, Rachel is furious," he said, voice unsteady. "I don't know what to do." I folded my hands. "I hear you." "She says you embarrassed us. You don't trust family. She says I need to protect our future." I let the silence count to 5. "I'm protecting mine," I said. "And in time, that protects yours." He rubbed his brow. "She won't let it go unless you sign something. Anything." "I won't." He stared at the spoon between us. "Why does this feel like war?" "Because peace built on surrender isn't peace," I said. "You're worried about losing face. I'm worried about losing myself. Losing face can be repaired. Losing myself cannot." He looked up. In his eyes was not anger, but the terror of a boy who has just learned the difference between wanting calm and being brave. "She says I'm weak if I don't make this happen." "You're not weak for refusing harm," I said. "You're only weak if you know it's wrong and do it anyway." He exhaled, low. "What should I tell her?" "Tell her the boundary is firm. Tell her all communication goes through my attorney, Donovan Pike. Tell her love without consent is control by another name." He nodded, then flinched. "She'll leave if I don't deliver." "Then you face loss honestly, not by stealing safety from your mother." He froze, then reached for my hand and stopped halfway. I wanted to be the son who made everything smooth. "You can still be the son who tells the truth," I said. "In the long run, that's what's smooth." He swallowed. "Are you angry with me?" "I'm clear." I said, "Clarity can sound like anger when you're used to fog." He tried a thin smile. "You always talk like the weather." "It's how I survived storms." We walked to the door. He hesitated. "Can I come by tomorrow if things are bad?" "You can come by when things are good," I said. "Either way, knock." He nodded. The keys stopped their rattling. He stepped off the porch, shoulders heavier, spine a touch straighter. I watched him head toward the street, speaking to no one. Inside, the kettle clicked off. I poured fresh tea and listened to the house breathe, steady and self-respecting. On the chair, Benjamin's navy blue blazer waited. I touched the cuff and heard his counsel rise, like the words on the ivory note card held by the seashell magnet on the fridge. "Hold your line. Speak in calm sentences. Don't rush your kindness." Sud. In the glare off the window, I saw my face. Not hard, just finally whole. No courthouse, no reporters, no speeches. My victory lived on paper and in the cool weight of a silver pocket watch. The green ledger and the binder sat on the table. Gold seals lifted like small suns. My hands steady, my breath even. I checked the mailbox. Gold-edged registered mail receipts perched like bluebirds. Signed, dated, recorded. Donovan's text was brief. All recorded. I pinned the receipts to the corkboard above the phone. The house seemed an inch taller, as if the roof trusted the walls again. I brewed coffee in the porcelain pot and set 2 magnolia cups, one for me, one for the memory I love. On the chair, Benjamin's blazer kept its post. I took his blue ink letter from the binder and placed it beside the cup. "This is armor, not bragging," he wrote. That sentence carried me through every room this week. Now it settled like a neatly folded blanket. I opened the back door and let the yard air in. No music, no applause. The magnolia needed deadheading. The oak limbs, heavy with Spanish moss, needed tying back. Life kept its ordinary list. I stood on the threshold and felt the hinge glide clean. That is what the seal gave me. It didn't make me powerful. It removed the wobble. Power isn't noise. It's a door that doesn't rattle when the wind insists. I sat and signed one last page for Donovan's file. Date, full name, clear hand. Elma would press the gold notary seal later. I closed the binder with a steady palm, no flourish, no second guessing. My breath found its path. The phone buzzed. "Matthew." I told her, "She's angry. I'll come by later." I answered with a single word. "Yes." No lecture. Quiet victory doesn't perform. It proceeds. I wiped the table with lemon oil polish. I returned Benjamin's letter to its sleeve, smoothed the crease. Then I folded the navy blue blazer, aligned the buttons, and set it beside the binder, a flag and its pole. I didn't feel triumph, only alignment. My life and my will stood in the same place. I stepped onto the porch with my coffee. The steps were cool, the rail warm where the sun had just touched. Birds stitched noise into the hedge. I breathed in, breathed out. I said it aloud because the house deserved to hear it. The greatest victory is signing in the right place, then stepping onto the porch. No one cheered. A squirrel scolded me for shifting his route. I laughed, the quick kind that needs no company. I took another sip. Across the street, a neighbor dragged a trash bin. A bus sighed at the corner. I was simply a woman with her papers in order, a fence that held, a kitchen that knows my name. I didn't win against anyone. I won for myself, for the quiet that keeps a life intact. Evening laid gold over the garden, a calm glaze across leaves and fence lines. I carried my cup to the bench beside the magnolia. Petals were a dusting of road grit. A ladybug walked the rim like a careful surveyor. I loosened the soil around a root with the handle of a spoon and let my shoulders settle. I remembered the wedding and table 13 hidden behind the floral arch. Tonight, the magnolias frame me on my terms. No seating chart, no planner, just the yard, my breath, my name. I spoke toward the quiet that still holds Benjamin. I'm all right now. The armor you left fits. The house is signed and sealed, steady as a good fence. Our son is learning where courage begins. I won't carry his lessons for him. I'll keep the gas lantern lit. A breeze lifted the Spanish moss. The air smelled of cut grass and promises kept. A neighbor passed with a dog. We traded a small wave that says, I see you. The garden hummed. The world proceeded without greed. Silence can be bright when it's honest. I set Benjamin's blue ink letter on my lap and the navy blue blazer beside me. Not as trophies, as anchors. When sorrow visits again, it will find me here, not hiding. I'll make 2 cups and choose sentences that don't harm me to say. That is how I will live the time that remains. Before we say goodbye, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee, or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Tell me in the comments. I read every note with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing, not only to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Wherever you are, I hope you carry this story with you. Remember, sometimes the miracle doesn't knock on your door. It waits, quietly, until you feel ready to open your heart. Take care, and I'll see you in the next story. The sun slipped behind the oak and drew a clean line along the fence. I stood and watered the magnolias the way Benjamin taught me, close to the roots, never splashing the leaves. When I finished, the garden smelled like rain, though the sky was clear. I carried the empty cup inside, turned the silver pocket watch so the safe gave its soft click. A life keeping its promises. I once sat hidden behind flowers that weren't mine. Now I sit among magnolias that are, and I speak without raising my voice. My silence belongs to me, and it travels farther than any shout. I am home, and the door is open. Safe.